All right. So we're on a new endeavor and we're going to bring you guys into a world that me and Eric and Steve have been a part of for years and years and years. We're going to bring you into our world, but we're going to blend it with the world that you're already familiar with, you know. So this is shoot style sessions. I am Shane G. In the middle is Eric G.
What
To
up?
his right or left, depending on, you know, where you're at, is our homeboy Steve. What's good, y'all?
What's up, man?
Man, just chilling, man. Um, so yeah, it's been, you know, with Netflix, Raw going to Netflix. 2025 has been a big year so far. AEW going to Max. Um, it's been a big year for wrestling, so you know I'm definitely looking forward to getting into some of those conversations. But we're gonna take it back first. So what I want to know from you, gentlemen, is what got you guys into wrestling in the first place? Who introduced you to it? Who was your favorite wrestler? All that. Give me all that good stuff.
Eric, I'll let you go first.
All right, so obviously being that my big brother is here, growing up, you obviously take a lot of influence from what's around you. So he was big into wrestling, and I was instantly like, "What is this? Like, what? Like, why are you so hyped about this every Saturday morning?" So it started there, and I think the first wrestler that I remember seeing and being like, "Oh, this dude is the shit. He's cool," is Bret Hart. Like he had the whole pink get up with the shades that matched the gear, that matched the pants, that matched the boots, and he just had something about the way that he told the story whenever he was working matches that it was something that I didn't understand why I liked it so much when I was a little kid. But obviously, looking back, I can like look back and be like, okay, I can like see and pinpoint little things that I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like just the way that he just approached working in the ring was just something that I just knew as a little kid I loved. And then obviously coming up out of that, you get into the Attitude Era, and the first person that pops into my mind, which is probably my favorite wrestler of all time, is Stone Cold Steve Austin. And just the anti-authority movement that he was on, the DTA, don't trust anybody, like I'm doing this shit on my own. Like just his whole demeanor and how he like didn't like was like never afraid of nobody, whether it was Undertaker, Kane, like all these like people that like in wrestling theory you should be afraid of. Stone Cold just walk right up to him and be like, I don't give a shit, like I am gonna whoop your ass, like, and I'm gonna take this title, like all. And then obviously the iconic feud with Vince McMahon, probably the most iconic wrestling feud in history, like going against your boss. Like everybody grew up wanting to do that. So I just, when those two key things are what I think about when I think about growing up and watching wrestling for sure.
Yeah, you definitely couldn't help it being in my family. Like you were gonna be a wrestling fan for sure. Like it was either I was gonna force you into it in the backyard on the trampoline because we were gonna wrestle. That's we want to go outside and play. That meant wrestling on the trampoline. So you were gonna be getting power bombed and all that stuff, jumping off of our what's it called? We had like a little like the monkey bars and like the little slide and stuff like that. And we jumping off of that, doing swan tons and frog splashes. So yeah, you couldn't help it.
Yeah, not at all.
Bret Hart, that's a solid pick though. What I liked about Bret was he always, I think what you're talking about, the way he worked in the ring, he still had the ability to make his matches look real. Like he made them like they were actual sporting competitions rather than two dudes who are working together to make a match look good. His stuff looked like a fight still.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
What about you, Steve?
And I think that wrestling may have been like the first sport / entertainment that I really fell in love with, including football. I think when I was, my uncle was a little bit younger. He was about 10 years older than me. So I kind of always looked up to him as, sort of my big brother. And, he was always doing, kind of what I thought was the cool stuff at the time. And I think back, like, in 2000 or 2001, I remember, I spent the night over, my grandma's house. That's where my uncle lived when he was in he may have been graduating high school or going into college. And he'd had on the pay-per-view for WrestleMania 17, which was, obviously what people recognize a lot as maybe the best WrestleMania ever. And I just remember kind of just falling in love, not only with the match, but when I first saw that promo, and I may have been in third grade or somewhere around there. I was, I think I was around 8 years old. But I remember watching that promo leading up to the Stone Cold Rock match with, Limp Bizkit, My Way, and seeing the match.
Iconic.
And I just remember being so caught up emotionally in it. And I just watched it for, been watching this product for 2 hours. And I remember right after that ended, I wanted to immediately know, hey, when am I going to get to see these guys next? And then I found out, it's on TNN, it's on Raw, the next night. So, I wanted to see the fallout. And I think it just kind of took off from there. I think we were lucky when we were, Eric and I, and you too, Shane, being kids or, younger and what's called the Attitude Era, which, I think is probably the golden era of the business. And so, I got a chance to get introduced to all these superstars that are now Hall of Famers, and basically, kind of took that off and then just fell in love with it. I know, now at, my advanced stage, I kind of understand the art of it more of what they're trying to do, but they did such a good job back in the day of selling it as real. You would kind of be invested into these feuds, thinking when you're young, this is some real stuff. So yeah, that's kind of when I got introduced to wrestling, and I'm consider myself lucky and blessed to have kind of gotten the chance to see all those guys in their prime.
Yeah, that's a good time to come in. If you come in when it's at its, one of its peaks, because there's really, at least in the modern era, in my opinion, there's been 3 peaks. We're in one right now. This is a peak moment for sure. The last, 3-4 years, I'd say. Then of course the Attitude Era, and then that 80s era when WrestleMania first started. Now that was before all of our time, obviously, but coming in at a hot era like that, I can't imagine what it's like to have been a fan who came in during the PG era.
Yeah.
It's your first introduction to wrestling. It's what does your worldview on what wrestling even is? How that's got to be drastically different than mine. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because as somebody who was, in middle school going into high school when the Attitude Era was at its height, that was a totally different thing. So, I'll give y'all my background in 1 minute. We're going to take a quick break.
Yo, what up? It's your boy, Mr. Marcus. I know y'all want to sign up for our email list. Why do you want to sign up? Because you want to have the information that we have first. You want to be in the know. You want to have it in real time. I need you to click that button to sign up for the Ethos Media Network email list. I know you also can find us on Reddit. I know that you want to press that button. Just go ahead and do it. Stop bullshitting. Just do it.
So for me, I would say that it was my big cousin Marvin. So shout out to Marvin. Let me put him over real quick on here.
Didn't think Marvin would be getting a shout out.
Yeah, definitely. So he, so it sounds like everybody, all of us had somebody older that brought us to it. So my earliest memories are going to his house on the weekends and watching Saturday morning wrestling, just like Eric was saying. So back in those days, this was slightly before Raw. This was because Raw started in 1993. So this was probably 1992 when I was introduced to wrestling. And so in those times before Raw, everything was syndicated. So and on our side of town, we lived in Oak Park, Michigan. So that was the west side of Detroit, And so on that side of town, you got, I think, Superstars. But where my cousin lived in Mount Clemens, which is on the east side of Detroit, they got Wrestling Challenge, I think, which was basically the same show, but not exactly. Some of the matches were a little bit different, and sometimes some of the matches were a little bit different on my side because you weren't ever seeing anything live. They were just taping, house show matches and putting them on Coliseum Video and airing certain ones on Saturday morning. So you were never really seeing anything live. Storylines were really carried out over long periods of time because it had to go from pay-per-view to pay-per-view, and there were only 4 a year. You know what I mean? So that was my introduction to it. And then wrestling with him in the backyard because he had a fence, so we would have cage matches. And, we had like the wrestling, like stuffed toys or whatever that you squeeze in their hand. And Macho Man would say, "Ooh, yeah." And Hulk Hogan would say, "Let me tell you something, brother." Like these are my core memories as a child. And so like I think my first favorite wrestler was actually Crush. He was this dude from Hawaii. And I just thought he was cool. Like he wore cool gear. You know what I'm saying? He used to crush people's heads. Like that was his finishing move. And like, he was just cool to me. So that was my first favorite wrestler. And then I came up in the 1, 2, 3 Kid, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Diesel era. Bam Bam Bigelow, Doink the Clown, dudes like that. The Undertaker when he was first starting, all that kind of stuff. And then, progressing into the Attitude Era. But then WCW was popping at the same time. So their cruiserweight division was going crazy around this time. So you had Rey Mysterio Jr. at the time, Juventud Guerrera, Eddie Guerrero, Psychosis. Like you had all these guys that were from Mexico coming up and just doing some of the craziest stuff you've ever seen because they weren't wrestling like this at all anywhere in America, really. So I grew up watching that stuff too. Then the formation of the NWO and seeing how the Clique kind of existed in both companies. And that was kind of crazy to me at the time. I'm like, wait, I know these guys are all the Clique, but some of them are NWO, some of them are DX, X-Pac, both. Like, this is, so I grew up in that. Like, it was a time. It was a time for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, definitely shout out to my cousin Marvin for introducing me to this thing that I've been watching for over 30 years now. So yeah, man. Who was you said Bret Hart, Eric? Who was your favorite growing up, Steve?
Man, I had a ton, so it's hard to pick. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably have to go The Rock. At the time, it's tough. Stone Cold's right there too. I love Kurt Angle. Triple H was great too. You can kind of put just a group of them together. But like if I had to pick one, I just think The Rock was perfect foil for Stone Cold, who at the time was the biggest star in the business.
All right, I'm gonna try to make it easier for both of y'all. Then, not your favorite. Who do you think was the best wrestler in ring?
Wrestler in ring. All right, Eric, you go ahead.
For that time period, probably Kurt.
Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, probably Kurt.
I think Kurt Angle is top 3 to ever do it.
I think Kurt is top 3, and I think Shawn Michaels, when he came back the second time, after his back injury, after he got hurt wrestling the Undertaker, I think when he came back that second time, that run is easily one of the best runs in wrestling history.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I love that, Eric. I'd probably go. Yeah, I mean Kurt or Chris Benoit, based off like the in-ring work. I know it's not a popular name to, say, and off, outside of the ring. That's
different story.
It doesn't need about, but in ring, I just remember Chris Benoit can really go with anyone. He was kind of the perfect partner, the dancing partner to go with anyone, whether The Rock, whether it was someone like a big guy like Kane or Undertaker, or whether it was going against someone kind of as talented or more talented than he was with Kurt Angle. Chris Benoit was just such a great technician inside the ring.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly.
Chris was amazing. Like it's, the thing that it's a shame what he did because of how good he was in the ring. So it's just like, you always have to couple those things together whenever you talk about him. You have to acknowledge how good he was in the ring if you're just being objective. You know what I'm saying? Like objectively, he is one of the greatest wrestlers probably ever. You know what I mean? But you just always have to go, well, yes, he's also a piece of shit because he murdered his family. Like, you have to do that.
The landscape we're in now, a lot of people can't ever separate the art from the artist. And so, unfortunately, he did what he did, and it's absolutely deserved to kind of make that comment. But it's too bad that it did happen because it soiled what otherwise was, one of the greatest wrestling careers maybe ever.
Yeah, and I mean, even his wife's contributions are often ignored. Like she was one of the greatest heel managers of all time.
Oh, she was excellent woman.
Yeah.
She was amazing, you know what I mean? But everything gets overshadowed by the fact that she got murdered by her psycho husband, you know what I mean? So it's just fucked up. But
Yeah, it's like can't even damn near even bring that up almost.
yeah, it's like, you know, because especially Eric with some of the channels that we watch, we get to see a lot of that old work now, you know, where they go back and they're like, look at, you know, when Woman was with Ric Flair in the early 90s when he came back to WCW and stuff. Like, I forgot about all of that.
Yeah.
You know, so she was doing some work.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think I have to actually go with 4. I don't think I can do a top 3. I have to do a 4. And for me, I think it's you Bret Hart. Bret Hart's up there. Shawn Michaels, purely based off influence and skill, but influence alone. Like, I feel like Shawn Michaels and RVD, they kind of are the godfathers of the whole modern day style. You don't have an AJ Styles, no Seth Rollins, no Kenny Omega, none of these guys, like, without Shawn and RVD. So
I agree.
I agree with that.
So I'll say Shawn though, just because he was a little bit before RVD. So I'll give it to him. But you could really throw either name in. So and then Kurt Angle, and then modern day Bryan Danielson.
I'll give you that one. Yeah, I'll give you that one too.
Incredible. Like, he's done things, his body of work. And then how I judge it too. I was telling Eric this the other day. Steve, what do you think about this? How I judge how good a wrestler is well, okay, this is how I choose who the best wrestler is. If everybody who wrestles you has their best match against you.
I like that. No, that's a really good way to put it, because you know that means your litmus test is do you elevate the other guy in the ring across from you, or you know, whether it's a tag match or a triple threat match, you know, whoever's in the ring with you, they're elevated because of the work that you're doing. So I definitely love that, you know, your interpretation of, you know, what's the best wrestler.
And by that standard, I think then Danielson is obviously up there.
He's definitely
Yeah, I agree.
Great
he's
matches
out any
Cena.
kind, for sure.
Yeah.
And like, Cena's not really a work rate guy, but he's had great matches against Danielson. So it's like, all right, that means Danielson is, you know what I'm saying? Like,
That was like right around the time when Cena started stepping his ring work up in general anyway.
during that US title run.
Yeah.
Man, what a great time as when Cena was doing that. I think it's kind of overlooked, and I'm glad that you guys, you know, Eric, you just hit on it. You know, the twilight of the Cena prime, right, where he was United States champion, and then, you know, when he eventually faced off with Rollins to unify the championships at SummerSlam. I think it was maybe 2016. But during that 9-month run or so, Cena really did up his work rate, and just some of the matchups he had, you know, the guys he was facing, you could just tell, like you said, Shane, he was elevating every guy he was in the ring with. I think that Cena really took that period of his career super serious, because I think he knew it was kind of nearing the end in terms of his career with regard to, you know, holding championships and being, you know, steadily in the picture. You know, I think he had Hollywood coming up. He had a lot of stuff that he was, you know, venturing onto. But man, it's funny that you mentioned Bryan Danielson, who arguably, objectively, is like maybe one of the greatest wrestlers ever. And then you mix it with, you know, we talk about Cena, who's just so stylistically different than Bryan Danielson, but they both kind of come together to accomplish the same thing, which you said was he elevates guys in the ring when he faces off with them. He's made so many guys.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that Cena run too, I think there was a few things he was trying to accomplish there. I think one, he was and this is actually a perfect segue into our next segment with the Cena talk. So, but Cena, I think one, he was probably being bothered by the fact that everyone was like, you can't wrestle. Like, that was a narrative about Cena. It was like, you're only pushed because Vince wants you to be pushed, and they're trying to make you Hogan and blah, blah, blah. You can't really wrestle. So that was a narrative. So I think he wanted to dispel that. Two, he wasn't in the world title picture anymore, and because people were tired of him winning every time he fought for the WWE title. So it was like, okay, US title, cool. Other people can be in the main event scene. So I think he wanted to step away from the main event scene and, you know, improve his work rate. And then three, it sort of changed the narrative about people hating Cena, because after that, when he came back, people loved him again. You know, he'd come back for his little one match a year or whatever, and then go off and do Hollywood. People are excited to see him now. And it was after the US title run. If he had just left to go to Hollywood after all those world title wins, I don't know if it's the same reception.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, like with Cena for me, like this is I'll tie it back to what we're talking about, but like me as a fan, I think I kind of like right when I was in high school, I kind of just stopped watching it and like it just phased out. It wasn't like purposeful or me like being embarrassed that I was a wrestling fan. It kind of like ended right where like Punk was champion, and I loved Punk. So and it, I think a lot of it had to do with a combination of the storylines that the WWE was writing, as well as I think relative to what we have now, a lack of star power. And you guys may disagree. I'm not saying necessarily wrestling wise it was bad, but I just think, from the period from, let's say, 2012, 2013 to like late 2016, basically like when Rollins went over on Cena, it was hard for me as a fan, that was casual at the time, to stick with it. Once I started kind of getting back into it is when I got introduced to Roman Reigns. I got introduced to, Seth Rollins when he cashed in on the Roman and Brock match. All these guys, Orton was still, doing his thing. I think the era where it was, your Alberto Del Rios, your Rybacks, and no offense to those guys. I think they definitely had their own skill sets, but I just a mixture of that. Like, the creative writing, it was hard for a casual fan like time to be invested in a lot of that. I think a lot of it was just kind of silly in that little 4 or 5 year stretch. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, that's when Vince started losing his mind. Like was the point he should have. That was 2009, 2010 was the point that he should have basically given over creative to Triple H. He should have gave it over at that point, because the last 10 years, the only reason that WWE was even getting eyeballs is because it was the only wrestling product. Yeah. Like until AEW came along, I didn't watch. You know what I mean? And like I was
TNA
first year AEW. You know, and I didn't really start getting heavy back into WWE until Vince left. Then it was like, oh, okay, now me and Eric, we got to tune in every week because the booking's different. It makes sense now. They're not forgetting storylines from week to week. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, that's really
people. Like, they were actually doing some shit. So
that's news to me, Shane. That you kind of got back into it, as you said, when Triple H really took over, which I think was maybe 2022 or right after the WrestleMania in Dallas, I think is when it kind of just switched hands.
That's when it became necessary watching for me again. Like before that, it was like I was getting back into it because of the pandemic and because we didn't have anything to do. So I was like, I need something to watch on TV. So I tuned back into wrestling. But like I said, AEW really sparked my love for wrestling again. And then when Triple H took over WWE, it sparked my love for WWE again.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So, again, speaking of Cena, though, hip-hop, streetwear, art, we're going to be talking about the ring and the raps. So how do these things blend together? For me, my first memory of seeing specifically hip-hop and wrestling together was, again, early 90s, that cartoon era. There was a group called Men on a Mission. One of those gentlemen, most people would probably know as Viscera, but back in those days, his name was Mabel, and it was Mabel and King Mabel. That's right. And this was slightly before King Mabel. This is when he was a good guy still. And they had a manager named Oscar, and Oscar used to rap them to the ring on their entrance. Very basic Sugar Hill Gang style raps. You know what I mean?
Shane, let me butt in and ask, because this may be the same guy. Was Oscar the same guy who was singing and rapping for the one man gang? AKA I forgot what his other
Hakeem the African Dream.
Yeah, was he his valet, or was that a different guy?
No, that was a different guy. That was Reverend Slick.
My apologies. Go ahead.
No, you're good. That was Reverend Slick.
I can see why you would think that, though.
Yeah.
That guy was great.
Yeah. So shout out Slick.
Shout out Slick.
No, but Oscar, he used to rap them to the ring. and their whole gimmick was being rappers. You know what I mean? They used to dress in like almost like Missy Elliott style, like wrestling gear and stuff, and it was like purple and gold, and you know they would have the crowd doing this, and you know that whole thing. So that was really for me the first time I saw those things blended together, and then early Nation of Domination when Farouk first changed from that blue helmet character to the modern Farouk that, you know, was the Nation of Domination leader. But before he had his recruits, he had these two white guys named Wolfie D and like JC Ice or something like that. And they would rap him to the ring over the Nation of Domination beat. So those were kind of the first two introductions to like rap and wrestling being blended together. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, it's not just like the theme music, like they incorporate other stuff. And then I remember at a WrestleMania, Boys to Men sang the Star Spangled Banner or whatever at the beginning. So, or America the Beautiful, which, you know, whichever one it was. But so yeah, just little stuff like that. So I noticed it from pretty young, and now it's pretty overt. Like rappers are in the audience. They invite Travis Scott on to Netflix, and West Side Gun's doing theme songs for rappers. Yeah. And so it's definitely evolved and become way more of an obvious marriage. But what do you guys what are you guys' early memories of music and wrestling together?
Oh man, all of that, all the NWO like early theme music, like when they started mashing up like the original theme, and then especially like flipping it with the Wolfpack theme and everything, with C Murder rapping that shit, like that's when I first started noticing, like, okay, like this is really starting to really seep its way into wrestling. Then the Attitude Era, what album was that came out? I don't remember the name of the album, but there was like a whole
Aggression.
Yeah, that
I'm sorry, excuse me, WWF Aggression.
Yep, WWF Aggression. There was like a whole CD of just like they flipped a bunch of themes, and on that one, that was where the DX remix really popped off of their flip. When Run DMC did it, they had a whole music video for it. Like DX, Stephanie McMahon, they're all in the video. Like shit was crazy. So
yeah, it's really cool to, like, you know, that you bring this up, Shane. I think it's a really cool pertinent topic with, you know, kind of what we saw at the Raw Netflix with you know, when we saw Travis Scott coming out with Jey Uso, and you know, I heard his song. I gotta still figure out what the name of that song was. That was a cold song.
I don't even think it's out yet, because Shane brought this up to me. Remember like a couple months ago, Roman and Jimmy pulled up to SmackDown, and they were playing the Travis
It was
song.
that song.
And Jimmy was like, what song was that? And Roman was like, it ain't out yet. It's the same song.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, because that's a really cool song. But going back to what Shane you know, said, it's a really pertinent topic, you know, hip hop in wrestling, because I think, you know, for all of Vince McMahon's faults, I think one of the many reasons that made him kind of a visionary is recognizing how mainstream and how influential hip hop was to the world, especially the United States. You know, back in the 80s, really, but you know, in the 90s, you know, through the 2000s, I remember being a huge Mark Henry fan. You know, he was doing his thing back in the 90s in the Attitude Era, but when he got, you know, reincarnated as this badass Mark Henry, you know, with the dreads,
pain.
You know, yeah, here comes the pain. You know, his feuds with Taker. I remember when he came out on a SmackDown, and 3-6 Mafia, you know, was doing his theme live, and it was just so cool.
Yeah, I forgot.
You don't have to be a rap fan. You know, the whole crowd that, you know, I'm sure a lot of them, you know, hadn't heard of that song, but they saw how it kind of jibed with, you know, Mark Henry, his persona, him coming out, and you know, people were just getting, you know, hyped to it. So it's really cool to see the progression and how WWE, and you know, you're going to touch more, Shane, I'm sure, you know, through these episodes on AEW, because you watch a little bit more of it than I do. But you know, with regard to WWE, one thing they've always been kind of consistent on is the hip hop integration with the WWE fans and the talent.
100%. Like I'm even just sitting here thinking about it right now of how many mainstream rappers have done theme music for wrestlers. Like Lil Kim did Trish Stratus's theme song.
Yeah.
Who was
Cena had his own theme, you know, that like he
Cena put out a platinum album.
Yeah.
Cena's album went platinum.
Yeah.
Then Stephanie McMahon, I want to say Jackie O did her theme song. The first one, the I'm all grown up now and I'm listening to her.
Really cool song.
Naughty by Nature did Shane McMahon's music. Here Comes the Money. That's Snoop, obviously he did Sasha Banks's theme song. You know, that's his little cousin, but you know, and he's always around. So and then now, like I said, you got Smoke DZA and West Side Gun doing a track with MVP for the Hurt Syndicate theme music. You know, that's all three of them. Yeah, and MVP's got a verse on there and it's hard. Like
I'm not surprised. He crushed his own theme music in WWE back in like 2005.
R-Truth, he's another one. R-Truth puts out videos still to this day, like on World Star and stuff like that. Like, you know, so it's very much integrated. I love seeing it, and you know, more of it, you know, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
sure.
You know how it progresses.
Some of the performances that have happened over the years, and just a little bit deeper of a dive into some of the integration, because MVP's done a lot of stuff with some of these rappers, so I want to deep dive into, you know, his background a little bit more. Swerve,
he's been around for forever.
Has music, you know, so we gotta deep dive on Swerve. Leo Rush has an album out. He has a few albums out, actually, I want to say. And he does like other stuff. He doesn't just rap. He does like instrumental type stuff. He does like, it's hard to explain, but it's like high energy music. I would just classify it as.
Oh, probably like EDM.
Right.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, kind of EDM. Who else? Harley Cameron, she sings. Mickey James has albums. Like it goes beyond rap, you know.
Yeah, he does rap, but I mean, Trig Williams has a hip hop theme, and it's you know, interactive with the crowd. I mean, and it gets over every time, you know, mostly because of him. He's just a superstar. But
those kind of
because the beat's cool, and you know, it gets the crowd involved with a simple, you know, three word, you know, phrase.
Yep.
As much as we trash on WWE's Def Rebel, like as much as like everyone trashes on them, I like whenever they mash it back into rap, it always still somehow makes sense. Yeah. Like it's still like it never really sounds bad. You know what I mean? Like they can make all the other techno horrible themes over for all these other people. You can get those out of here, but whenever they mash up rap for whatever reason, it never sounds bad. They need to figure out that formula and stick to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the talent has to take a role in fighting for what they want. I feel like, and I'm not gonna let Death Rebel completely off the hook here. I know that a lot of the themes are very good. I know I'll be the first one to say that. You know, Eric, you know, we always talk. You know, I'm an outspoken critic of it, but like at the same time, you know, there's a reason why the Romans, the Jey Uso, Jimmy, you know, a lot of the Bloodline, and then there's a couple others that have good themes, and I think a lot of it's
Michin's music is fire.
Yeah.
Sky's music is fire.
I think a lot of them want control and kind of fight for what they want their sound to be. And I think a lot don't. And, you know, a lot of it's the result that you get. So I think you gotta take over your own brand and put input into what you want it to sound like.
Yeah, true. You can tell when the wrestlers themselves are like really into the theme, because even if they themselves are not on the song, because like sometimes that you'll hear like little cadences of them being on the song, whether it's ad libs or just shouting out little shit here and there, like you'll hear that. But even if you don't hear that, like somebody like an Io Sky, like there's no words on Io Sky's song at all, but you can just tell by just the bop and how she moves and just everything like that song is 100% her. It can still be done without the words, but I think you're right, Steve. I think that they kind of gotta be more creative and step into that realm and be like, I want it to sound like this, so like let me put some more input into it.
Agreed.
Well, that's what Jim Johnson used to do. I guess whenever he was tasked with creating a theme song, and he's basically the guy responsible for every iconic theme that we love, from like the 90s all the way to really like the mid 2010s.
The Rock still has him with control over his theme music.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so Jim Johnson, what he would do is when he was tasked with creating music for a wrestler, he would have them come to the studio and he would talk to them about their character and about who they are and the type of music they like and all of this kind of stuff. And he would literally craft the song with the wrestler for that wrestler. That's why everybody's theme song instantly made you think of who the wrestler was. You can hear the majority of theme music and instantly somebody's picture pops into your head. You know what I'm saying? When you hear that wing, you're like, oh, Bret Hart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you hear the glass, instantly Stone Cold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Doom, doom, doom. Oh, The Rock. Like, instantly when you hear certain songs. Nowadays, it's not really like that. Nowadays, you have to either listen for the name at the beginning of the song or you have to look at the Titantron and see, okay, who is it? Like, so they need to get back to that a little bit of like personally crafting songs for the wrestlers themselves.
I agree. And I think Eric would agree with this. I was telling him, I think one of the most important first impressions you can have of a performer or a wrestler is their entrance, because it helps you identify 100%. Immediately. And if you have something cookie cutter, or you're like, you haven't separated yourself in the ring or outside of it or on the mic, either I'm going to look away or, I'll become disinterested or, I won't recognize the talent until they're walking to the ring. And, and the live crowd's going to react in kind too. I think you see with like The Rock, when he became heel, in this final boss run, he had, excuse me, he still had his babyface music, his fast paced, his song, and a lot of the fans, I'm sure us included, were, put back the Hollywood music, slow it down, make it so that, it's heel like you. And what he did was he integrated the start of it and then just slowly bridged to the Hollywood theme. And it was so cool. And you see every time he comes out now, he gets the pop, the babyface pop. And then when it slows down, he turns into his heel character with, the shit-eating grin, and the fans just eat it up. I love that.
Yeah.
I remember the very first time when that happened, because it was one of those things where he didn't tell anybody that was how it was going to change or anything. But then, it's just that little turn and then into the music. And then the crowd instantly like just knows from there. Cause like, then he walks out with that vest and the shades. And that's when everybody was like, oh shit, this is The Rock that we getting. Like, it was like that. I think that's a great example of what you just said. And I think another great example of that is the very, very first time Cody Rhodes came back for WrestleMania. What was that? 38, 39, whichever
38,
one of those.
38.
Yeah, 38. I think that's another great example, because obviously, as us being a little smarter than the average fan, we all kind of knew what that was about to be. Like, we kind of knew that was about to be Cody. But there was still that like little hint of like, you didn't really 100% know for sure. So then when the music actually like starts kicking in and then like the entrance actually happens, like you kind of just like hear that like elevation, like crescendo of the fans being like not really fully understanding to them being like, oh, wait a minute, now we get it. And I thought that was beautiful, because like by the time he's like, midway down the ramp, standing there looking all poised, looking up like this, like by that point, like everybody just knew like, okay, we got a star in the building. Like whether there was people that were previous fans of Cody or not before that, you just knew at that moment, like, okay, something major just happened and now we got to pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Even people like who, and I'm sure there was probably a small contingent in that Dallas crowd who may not have known who Cody was, just because they may have become fans after Stardust left the building. And, I'm sure they maybe have known, Dusty Rhodes, but like, even if you didn't know him, the way he was presented, the music, how he came out, you didn't have to know him to just start rooting for him. And like, this guy's hot shit. Like this, like Seth Rollins is growling. He doesn't like him. Like, it means that this dude means something. Like, so I'm going to get behind him.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That's definitely a good point. When you make people feel important, the crowd will accept them as important.
Yeah.
So that's just for any future wrestling bookers out there. If you make somebody feel important, we'll think they're important.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, gentlemen, give me your predictions. Just give me something big that you predict will happen in 2025.
Shane, you start off.
I think Jay White will win the AEW World Championship this year.
All right. I like Jay White. I haven't watched him enough, but I'd like to.
Bang bang gang over here all day. I think Eric froze. Steve,
Eric,
you go, and then I'll try to get him back together.
Okay, yeah. Eric, you're back on, right?
Yeah,
okay, go ahead. What's your big prediction for this year?
Oh.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah. I think my big prediction for this year is I think this is going to be the year of Drew McIntyre. I thought it kind of would be last year, after he got cashed in on by Damian Priest, but I thought WWE did a great job of booking it with long-term storytelling. I think Drew's going to have another WrestleMania moment, and I predict that he's going to go over and defeat Gunther at WrestleMania 41 for the World Heavyweight Championship.
So we got Drew going over Gunther at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
I would love to see that. I'd love
really
to see
cool.
that. Drew is also one of my favorite guys, so I would absolutely love to see that. So, Eric, 2025, give us something big. What's happening?
Punk wins a world title this year.
Okay.
World Heavyweight or WWE?
World Heavyweight.
Okay.
Okay. So you have Punk winning the World Heavyweight title just at some point during the year.
Just at some point. Yeah, at some point.
Steve has Drew McIntyre beating Gunther at WrestleMania for the world title.
Well, I would let you. He already knows. I would love to see that.
Yeah. You know what? WWE or World Heavyweight. One of those two titles. It'd be just as cool either way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. They've done a good job of elevating the World Heavyweight title. It feels important. So, yeah. And then for me, I got Mr. Bang Bang Gang, Jay White, winning the world title at some point during the year.
I love that.
All right, gentlemen. Well, this has been Shoot Style Sessions right here on the Ethos Media Network. Please make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe for all the latest content. Sign up for the email list below so that way you can get all the updates for all of our shows, Bar Exam, Entreprenegros, Politics as Usual, OTI when that starts back up, everything. If you prefer to listen to us, we're on all audio platforms. So go to Spotify, go to iHeartRadio, go to Audible, wherever you listen. And other than that, we'll catch you next week. Peace.
Peace.